She risked her life to save his dying CEO boss. Months later, she received a shocking news. A poor medical intern risks everything to save her dying CEO boss when no doctors are around. One wrong move, and she could lose her freedom, or his life. She walks away in silence, thinking it's over. But months later, she's summoned to a high-security office, and what they tell her changes everything. The man she saved secretly trusted her with a decision worth billions. Now, powerful people want her erased. She didn't ask for power. She didn't want the spotlight. All she did was the right thing. But when lies spread, allies disappear, and the truth puts her life in danger, will her courage save the world, or cost her everything? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from right now, and if this story speaks to you, make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Emma Carter twisted the combination lock on her locker, 4/17/23, her mother's birthday, though they hadn't spoken in 2 years. Her scrubs smelled of bleach and exhaustion, the fabric rough against her skin after 12 hours of mopping blood and emptiness from operating rooms where miracles happened to everyone but her. Through the locker room door, she could hear them. "Dr. Chen, that appendectomy closure was textbook. Really impressive work." The chief resident's voice carried that easy authority of someone who'd never doubted their right to be heard. Emma pulled off her hairnet slowly, watching through the gap in the door as Maya Chen, 26, bright-eyed, 8 months into her residency, blushed and smiled. Emma had seen Maya's sutures. They were competent. Emma's would have been better if anyone had let her hold anything sharper than a mop handle. She closed her eyes. "Not bitterness, Lord. Please, not bitterness." "Did you hear?" Another voice, younger. "Kai Whitmore's coming in today. Private consultation, executive wing." The tech billionaire. Humanitarian billionaire, thank you very much. The man's literally trying to cure diseases in Africa while building hospitals in... Emma closed the locker quietly. She didn't need to hear about important people with important purposes. She had 4 hours before her evening shift started, just enough time to sleep and pretend her medical degree from a state school counted for something. The rain started as she pushed through the hospital's service exit, cold drops mixing with the sweat on her forehead. She turned her face up to the grey sky. "I'm still here," she whispered, still listening, still waiting. Thunder rumbled in response, low and patient. The storm hit at 11:47 p.m., according to the clock that flickered twice before the backup generators kicked in. Emma had been mopping the same hallway for 20 minutes, the kind of meditative, invisible work that let her mind wander to the surgical journals she read on her phone during breaks. The network. Failure alarm sounded different than the usual codes, more urgent, more wrong. All personnel. Security lockdown in effect. Emergency staff delayed due to flooding on Route 7. Repeat. The announcement cut out. Emma's hands tightened on the mop handle. The executive wing was ahead, mahogany doors with brass nameplates catching the emergency lighting. Off limits. Always off limits. Then she heard it. A crash. Heavy, final. Her feet moved before her brain caught up. Sneakers squeaking on polished floors she'd cleaned 100 times. The door was ajar. Someone had propped it open, maybe rushing out when the alarm started. Inside, a man lay crumpled against an antique desk, one hand pressed to his abdomen, the other reaching toward a fallen phone. Blood seeped between his fingers, dark and determined. Emma knew that face. Everyone knew that face. Kai Whitmore's eyes found hers, unfocused, drowning. "Help," he managed. Just that. Just the one word. Emma's hands were already moving, checking his pulse, thready, weakening, pressing against the wound. Internal bleeding, severe, maybe a ruptured spleen or liver laceration. Minutes, not hours. She fumbled for her phone. No signal. The storm had taken everything. "Stay with me," she heard herself say, the words automatic, clinical. "Help is coming." But the corridor outside was silent, except for rain hammering against windows and the distant wail of alarms. Kai's breathing changed, growing shallow. Emma looked at the door, at the man dying in front of her, at her hands, steady despite everything, despite years of being told they weren't enough. The surgical kit on the wall, for emergencies only, authorized personnel only, gleamed red in its glass case. She thought of her mother's voice. "Baby, sometimes God asks us to do the impossible just to prove we're listening." Emma broke the glass. Emma's hands didn't shake. That surprised her most. She'd cleared the desk with one sweep, scattering papers and a framed photo, Kai with children in a village somewhere green and far away, and helped him onto the makeshift operating surface. His designer shirt tore easily under her fingers, revealing the swelling, the discoloration spreading like spilled ink. "I need you to stay conscious," she said, her voice steady, clinical, someone else's voice. "Can you do that?" Kai's eyes rolled towards her, glassy with shock. "You're the cleaning woman. Right now I'm a surgeon." She ripped open the emergency kit. Scalpel, clamps, sutures. Not enough, never enough. "This is going to hurt. Already hurts. Worse than this." She didn't wait for permission. Her hands found the landmarks she'd memorized from textbooks and late-night videos, from simulation labs she'd snuck into before campus security learned her face. The scalpel caught the light once before it disappeared into flesh. Blood welled up, hot and accusing. "God, guide my hands, please, please." The spleen was ruptured, bleeding freely into the abdominal cavity. Emma's fingers worked through memory and instinct, clamping vessels, irrigating with saline from the emergency supplies, her entire world narrowing to this body, this moment, this covenant between her will and death's patience. Kai gasped, trying to pull away. "Stay still." Firm, final. "I can't save you if you move." Can't breathe." His vitals were crashing, blood pressure dropping. She was losing him. Emma's vision tunneled. Somewhere outside, thunder cracked so loud the windows rattled. The lights flickered. In the darkness, she felt rather than saw the bleeding, her hands mapping geography by pulse and flow. No, not today. Not on my watch. She clamped the final vessel blind, working by touch, by faith, by the stubborn certainty that she had not cleaned floors for 7 years just to watch someone die when she could stop it. The lights came back. The bleeding had slowed. Kai's chest rose, fell, rose again. Emma's hands moved faster now, suturing layers, closing what she'd opened, sealing her work with the kind of precision that comes from caring too much to fail. Her fingers cramped. Her back screamed. She didn't stop. At 3:47 a.m., she tied off the final suture. At 3:48, Kai's eyes opened, focusing on her face. "You." His voice was raw. "You saved my life." Emma stepped back, looking at her hands, covered in his blood, steady as stone. "Help's coming soon. You'll be okay." "Who are you?" She looked at him for a long moment. This man the world called important, lying on a desk she'd polished yesterday, alive because of hands the world called invisible. "Nobody," Emma said softly. "I'm nobody." The distant sound of sirens finally reached them, growing louder. Emma's intern badge lay on the floor in a pool of drying blood, her photo staring up at the ceiling. She picked it up with shaking fingers, smudging the plastic with red. Kai was breathing, stable. That was all that mattered. She could hear voices now, urgent and approaching. Security. Real doctors. People who belonged in places like this. Her hands moved frantically, gathering bloodied gauze, throwing it into her cleaning cart, wiping down surfaces. The scalpel went into her pocket, She'd dispose of it later, somewhere far from here. Her gloves peeled off with a wet sound that made her stomach turn. But there was too much blood. On the floor, on the desk, on her scrubs, her arms, under her fingernails. Third floor, executive wing. The voices were closer. Emma looked at Kai one last time. His eyes were closed, his chest rising and falling in the steady rhythm she'd fought so hard to restore. He'd live. That's what mattered. He'd live. And she'd what? Take credit, demand recognition, stand there in her stained scrubs and explain that she'd performed unauthorized surgery with stolen equipment. Prison. That's what waited for her. Prison. Or worse. Emma set down her badge next to Kai's hand, the only proof she'd been here at all, and ran. The storm was breaking as she pushed through the service exit, rain washing down her face, her arms, carrying away blood and evidence, and everything that could tie her to the miracle inside. The sunrise was starting, pale and hesitant, turning the parking lot orange. She made it to a car, a 15-year-old Honda that started on the third try, and sat in the driver's seat, shaking so hard her teeth chattered. What had she done? Saved a life. But at what cost? Emma pressed her forehead against the steering wheel and finally let herself cry, her sobs lost in the sound of rain and distant sirens and the breaking day. The director of facilities management didn't look at her. Ms. Carter. He kept his eyes on the papers in front of him, shuffling them like they contained something more interesting than her life. Your services are no longer required. Emma sat perfectly still in the plastic chair across from his desk, her cleaning uniform pressed and spotless, her hands folded in her lap. May I ask why? You were found in a restricted area, against protocol. I was responding to an emergency. There was no emergency. He looked up finally, his face blank, practiced. According to our records, nothing unusual occurred last night. The executive wing was empty. Emma's breath caught. That's not true. Mr. Whitmore was never here. The director's voice dropped, taking on an edge that might have been warning or might have been fear. Do you understand? Nothing happened. You simply violated restricted access policies. That's the official record. The room tilted slightly. I saved his life. You were in an area you had no authorization to enter. He pushed a folder across the desk. Your final paycheck. Sign here. Emma looked at the paper, at the number that represented 7 years of mopping floors and swallowing invisibility. 7 years of watching less qualified people receive opportunities that should have been hers. 7 years of quiet endurance that had somehow led to this moment, being erased for doing the right thing. Will Mr. Whitmore be told? She asked quietly. That I was fired. Mr. Whitmore has been informed of all relevant personnel actions. So Kai knew. Kai knew they were erasing her, and he was letting it happen. Emma signed the paper. Her hand didn't shake. That surprised her again. In the locker room, she packed quickly. A spare pair of scrubs, the surgical journals she kept hidden behind extra uniforms, a photo of her mother from back when they still smiled at cameras. Other staff members moved around her, eyes averted, conversations dying when she passed. Maya Chen caught her arm as she headed for the door. Emma, I'm sorry. I didn't know they were going to... It's fine. Emma's voice came out flat, distant. I should have known better than to help. That's not... Maya's grip tightened. What you did last night. Everyone's talking about it. They're saying it was a miracle. They're saying nothing happened. But we know. The night staff knows. You saved... I was in the wrong place. Emma gently freed her arm. That's all the record will show. She walked out through the service entrance for the last time, the sunshine too bright after the fluorescent dimness inside. Her car was where she'd left it, patient and non-judgmental. She sat behind the wheel and stared at the hospital. 7 years of her life erased in an afternoon. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Keep quiet and move on. It's better this way. Emma deleted it and started the engine. The apartment was small, bedroom, kitchen, bathroom, all visible from the front door. But it was clean, and it was hers, and right now that felt like enough. Emma set her box of belongings on the kitchen counter and stood there, waiting to feel something. Anger, grief, fear. But there was only a strange, hollow peace. She'd done the right thing. She knew that with certainty. The rest, the consequences, the injustice, the erasure, those were beyond her control. Emma pulled out the leftover rice and vegetables from her fridge, reheated them in the microwave that had come with the apartment, and sat at her tiny table. She bowed her head. Thank you for giving me the skill to save him. Thank you for steady hands and clear mind. Thank you for... Her voice caught. Thank you for letting me be used for something that mattered, even if no one will remember it but you and me. The food was bland but warm. Emma ate slowly, watching the sunset through her single window, painting her blank walls orange and gold. Somewhere out there, Kai Whitmore was alive, breathing, continuing whatever important work important people did. And here she was, unemployed, erased, sitting in her small apartment with the certainty that she'd done exactly what God had asked of her. It should have felt like defeat. Instead, it felt like faithfulness. Emma washed her dish, changed into pajamas, and went to bed. Tomorrow she'd look for work. Tomorrow she'd figure out how to survive. Tonight she'd rest in the knowledge that when it mattered most, when life hung in the balance and no one was watching, she'd chosen courage over safety. And that, she thought as sleep finally came, was enough. The clinic smelled like disinfectant and desperation. Emma moved through the cramped waiting room, checking vitals, offering reassurances, doing the work no one else wanted to do for people no one else wanted to see. Ms. Carter? The clinic director waved her over, holding a certified letter. This came for you. Looks official. Emma's hands were covered in latex gloves, taking blood pressure for Mrs. Rodriguez, who came in every week with complaints that masked loneliness. Can it wait? It says urgent. Mrs. Rodriguez patted Emma's hand. Go, Mija. I'm not going anywhere. The envelope was heavy, expensive. Emma's name was printed in formal script across the front. She turned it over, examining the seal. Some law firm she'd never heard of, an address in the financial district. You in trouble? The director asked, concern creasing his weathered face. I don't think so. Emma slid her finger under the seal. The letter inside was brief, formal, and incomprehensible. Miss Emma Carter, your presence is required at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning regarding matters of urgent legal importance. Failure to appear may result in forfeiture of rights and privileges herein unnamed. Please bring valid identification. Hale and Associates, what does it say? Emma read it 3 times. I have no idea. That night, she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, running through possibilities. A lawsuit? Had someone from the hospital decided to come after her? Was this about student loans? Unpaid bills? At 2 a.m. she gave up on sleep and prayed instead, her words tumbling out in the darkness. I don't know what this is. I don't know if I should be scared. But I'm going to trust that you haven't brought me this far just to abandon me now. The alarm went off 4 hours later. Emma dressed in her only suit, purchased for her mother's funeral that never happened because they'd reconciled just in time, and stood in front of her bathroom mirror. She looked tired, older than 33, but her eyes were steady. Okay, she told her reflection. Let's see what this is about. The building was all glass and steel, reflecting the sunrise in shades of gold. Emma's shoes, polished but worn, clicked on marble floors that probably cost more than her annual salary. A receptionist with perfect makeup smiled with perfect teeth. "Ms. Carter, they're expecting you. 23rd floor." The elevator was silent, except for soft, classical music. Emma watched the numbers climb, her heart climbing with them. The 23rd floor opened onto a corridor lined with dark wood and oil paintings of stern men in judicial robes. At the end, double doors stood open, revealing a conference room with a view that stretched across the entire city. 3 people waited inside. One of them was Kai Whitmore. Emma stopped in the doorway, her breath catching. He looked different than he had that night. Healthier, obviously, but also something else. Humbler, more uncertain. "Ms. Carter." An older woman stood, extending her hand. "I'm Margaret Hale. Thank you for coming." Emma shook automatically, her eyes still on Kai. "What is this?" "Please sit down." Margaret gestured to a leather chair that probably cost more than Emma's car. "What we're about to tell you will be difficult to believe." Emma sat slowly, her purse clutched in her lap like a shield. "Try me." Kai leaned forward, his hands clasped on the conference table. "Ms. Carter, Emma, I owe you an apology. When you were fired, I was still recovering. By the time I was coherent enough to intervene, they told me you'd left quietly. I tried to find you, but... Emma's voice came out harder than she'd intended. "But someone had already started erasing you from the records. Not just employment records, everything. Bank accounts flagged, credit history scrubbed, like you'd never existed." The room tilted. "Why? Because of what you know?" Margaret slid a folder across the table. "And because of what I'm about to give you." Emma opened the folder with numb fingers. Inside were legal documents, pages of dense text she couldn't immediately process. "Mr. Whitmore has designated you as the contingency authority for the Whitmore Humanitarian Initiative," Margaret explained. "If anything happens to him, death, disappearance, incapacitation, you inherit complete control." Emma looked up sharply. "Control of what?" "Everything." Kai's voice was quiet. "The project? The patents? The assets? Approximately $4.2 billion in liquidated funds and intellectual property." The folder slipped from Emma's hands. "No." She stood up so fast the chair rolled backward. "No, I don't know you. I don't know anything about biotech or billions of dollars or... You know how to make the impossible choice when lives are at stake." Kai interrupted. "You know how to act without recognition or reward. You know..." His voice caught. "You know what it means to do the right thing even when it costs you everything. Find someone else. There is no one else." Margaret's voice was gentle but firm. "Emma, the people who tried to erase you, they're still looking. Right now, you're protected only by the fact that this agreement is sealed and witnessed. If you walk out that door, they'll find you eventually. Then unseal it, change it, give it to someone who knows what they're doing." I tried. Kai stood, moving to the window, his silhouette dark against the bright city. "The contract is ironclad. I can't change the terms. You're the successor, whether you accept it or not." Emma sank back into the chair, her mind spinning. "Why me? You don't know me." "I know what matters." Kai turned, and his eyes held something Emma hadn't seen that night in the executive wing. Genuine fear. "I know you'll do what's right, even when it's impossible. That's more than I can say for anyone else in my life." Margaret leaned forward. "Emma, we're not asking you to accept this lightly. We're asking you to survive long enough to understand what's at stake. Will you let us try to explain?" Emma looked at the folder, at the documents that claimed her life now belonged to something she couldn't comprehend. She thought about her small apartment, her clinic job, her quiet, invisible life. Then she thought about Kai's blood on her hands and the certainty that she'd done what God asked. "Explain," she said finally. But I'm not promising anything. Kai's shoulders relaxed slightly. That's all I'm asking. Margaret opened a laptop, and the wall screen illuminated with images: laboratories, hospitals in rural landscapes, children receiving injections, families gathered around clean water pumps. The Whitmore Humanitarian Initiative was designed to provide life-saving medical technology to underserved populations. Margaret began. Gene therapies for sickle cell, portable dialysis units, vaccines for diseases the pharmaceutical industry considers unprofitable. Emma leaned forward, studying the images. That's incredible work. It was supposed to be. Kai's voice turned bitter. Until my board realized how much money they could make if we patented everything and sold to the highest bidder instead of giving it away. So you went around them? I created a failsafe, a sealed corporate structure that would transfer control to someone outside the system if I was removed or killed. He looked at her directly. Someone whose moral compass I could trust absolutely. Based on one night? Emma's voice rose. You don't know me. You performed unauthorized surgery with stolen equipment to save a stranger's life, knowing you'd lose everything. Margaret's tone was matter-of-fact. Then you walked away without demanding recognition or compensation. That tells us everything we need to know. Emma shook her head. This is insane. I cleaned floors. I work in a free clinic. I can't run a biotech company. You won't have to. Kai pulled out another folder, thinner than the first. The operations team is intact. The scientists know their work. You'd be the ethical authority, the final decision-maker on distribution, pricing, access. The conscience of the operation. Margaret added, something we desperately need. Emma stood, moving to the window. 23 floors below, the city moved with purpose. People rushing to important jobs, making important decisions, living important lives. And here she was, being told she was supposed to control billions of dollars for people she'd never meet. What if I make the wrong choice? Then you'll make it for the right reasons, Kai said quietly. That's more than most people in power can say. A door opened behind them. A security guard entered, whispered something to Margaret. Her face paled. What is it? Kai asked. Margaret looked at Emma. Someone just tried to access your sealed file 30 seconds ago. The room went cold. They know she's here, Margaret said. The car had bulletproof glass and a driver who said nothing. Emma sat in the back seat, watching her life disappear through the tinted windows as they drove away from everything familiar. Margaret sat beside her, typing rapidly on her phone. We're taking you to a secure residence. You'll stay there until we can assess the threat level. This is really happening. Emma's voice sounded distant to her own ears. Someone actually wants to hurt me. They want to eliminate the obstacle between them and $4 billion. Margaret corrected. You're not a person to them. You're a problem. Emma closed her eyes. I should have just kept mopping floors. Then Kai would be dead, and the initiative would already be dismantled and sold for parts. Margaret's hand covered, Emma's, surprising in its warmth. I know this is terrifying, but you saved more than one life that night. The car pulled into an underground garage. Emma was led through a series of security checkpoints, retinal scans, metal detectors, armed guards who nodded at Margaret with familiar respect, until they reached an elevator that required 3 different key cards to operate. The apartment was on the 15th floor, modern, sterile, with furniture that looked like it had never been sat on. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed a view of the city, but Emma couldn't shake the feeling of being in an expensive cage. Make yourself comfortable, Margaret said. I'll have your belongings brought over. Don't leave without security, and don't contact anyone from your previous life. We can't risk them being traced. My mother. We'll monitor her. If there's any threat, we'll bring her in too. After Margaret left, Emma stood in the center of the living room, her arms wrapped around herself. The apartment was silent except for the distant hum of traffic far below. On the coffee table sat a Bible, leather-bound, expensive, impersonal. Emma picked it up and sat on the couch that no one had ever broken in. She opened to a random page, her eyes finding Esther 4:14. And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this? Her laugh came out broken. Royal position. Right. But her hands were shaking, and this time it wasn't from fear. It was from the terrible, impossible weight of understanding that her life had just been rewritten, and there was no going back to the safety of invisibility. Margaret returned at sunset with Thai food in paper containers and a briefcase full of documents. They ate at the kitchen island, Emma on a stool that was too tall, Margaret standing because she claimed it helped her think. "Tell me about the project," Emma said, pushing pad Thai around with her fork. "Not the corporate version. The truth." Margaret set down her container. Kai's younger sister died of sickle cell when he was 19. Preventable if they'd lived somewhere with better health care. It broke something in him, or maybe fixed something. He spent the next 15 years building a tech empire with one goal: fund medical research for diseases that kill the poor. That sounds noble. It was, until he took the company public to raise capital. Margaret's expression hardened. Investors don't care about nobility. They care about returns. Within 2 years, the board was pushing him to weaponize the research, sell to defense contractors, patent everything, maximize profit margins. Emma set down her fork. He refused? He tried, but corporate law is designed to protect shareholders, not ideals. Margaret pulled out a folder, spreading documents across the counter. 6 months ago, they attempted a hostile takeover. Kai barely survived the vote. That's when he created the failsafe. The contract that names me. Yes, buried in a shell company, witnessed by a judge who owes him a favor, sealed under attorney-client privilege. If Kai dies or is removed, control transfers to you. Not to the board, not to the shareholders, to the one person who saved his life expecting nothing in return. Emma studied the documents, pages of legal language that boiled down to one truth. She now stood between billions of dollars and the people who wanted it. "Why did you help him?" Emma asked. "You resigned years ago." Margaret's jaw tightened. "Because I watched them kill the first humanitarian initiative, a water purification project in Southeast Asia. Perfectly functional, cost-effective, ready to deploy. The board shelved it because it would compete with a bottled water subsidiary. Thousands died that year from waterborne diseases." She looked at Emma. "I told myself I was just following orders, just doing my job, and people died because I stayed silent." "You're trying to make up for it." "I'm trying to make sure silence never kills again." Margaret gathered the documents. "Kai gave me a second chance. Now he's giving you one. The question is whether you're brave enough to take it." Emma looked at her hands. Steady, capable, marked by years of work no one valued. "I'm a clinic nurse who performs blood pressure checks and dispenses antibiotics. I don't know anything about corporate governance or biotech or—" "You know when something is right or wrong." Margaret's voice softened. "That's the only qualification that matters. Everything else can be taught." A knock at the door made them both jump. Margaret moved with practiced efficiency, checking the security screen before opening it. Kai entered, looking exhausted. He'd loosened his tie, and there were shadows under his eyes that made him look younger, more vulnerable. "They're escalating," he said without preamble. "Victor Langley just called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning." "What's the pretext?" Margaret asked. "Concerns about my health. They want a full medical evaluation and cognitive assessment." His laugh was hollow. "They're going to try to declare me unfit." Emma stood. Can they do that? With enough doctors on payroll, absolutely. Kai sank into a chair. If they succeed, the board takes temporary control, and the first thing they'll do is dismantle the initiative and liquidate the assets. Unless the failsafe activates, Margaret said, which means I'd have to die or disappear. Kai looked at Emma. And that would make you an instant target. The room fell silent. Emma moved to the window, watching the city lights blink like distant stars. Somewhere out there, people were living normal lives, going to work, coming home, worrying about normal things. And here she was, trapped in a penthouse with decisions that could save or destroy thousands of lives. What do you want me to do? She asked quietly. I want you to learn everything you can. Kai said, Margaret will teach you the basics. Corporate, structure, decision-making protocols, the key players. If this goes sideways, you'll need to be ready. Ready to inherit a war I didn't ask for. Ready to finish what we started. Kai's voice held a note of desperation. Those kids in the photos, the ones receiving treatment, they're alive because of this initiative. If the board wins, those programs end. The patents get sold. The research gets locked behind paywalls. Emma turned from the window. And if I run? If I just refuse? Then you'll spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder, Margaret said bluntly. They've already started erasing you. They won't stop just because you walk away. Emma closed her eyes, feeling the weight of choices she'd never wanted to make. She thought of that night in the hospital, the scalpel in her hand, Kai's life slipping away, the impossible decision to act when no one was watching. She'd thought the hard part was over. She'd been wrong. Okay, Emma said finally. Teach me. They worked until midnight, Margaret walking Emma through organizational charts, funding streams, patent portfolios. Emma's head swam with information, names, numbers, acronyms that sounded like alphabet soup. This is impossible, Emma said, dropping her pen. I can't learn all of this. You don't have to memorize it, Margaret said patiently. You just need to understand the framework. When the time comes, you'll have advisors, experts, legal teams. Your job is to ask the right questions and trust your judgment. My judgment got me fired from a cleaning job. Your judgment saved a man's life. Kai had been sitting quietly in the corner, reviewing his own files. Emma, stop thinking of yourself as inadequate. You made a split-second decision under pressure that trained professionals might have hesitated on. That's not luck. That's character. Emma rubbed her eyes. I just wish I understood why me. There must be hundreds of people more qualified. Qualifications can be corrupted. Kai interrupted. Everyone in my world can be bought, threatened, or manipulated. You're the only person I've met who acted purely because it was right. He stood, moving to the window. My sister used to say that God puts people in impossible positions to reveal who they really are. I didn't believe her then. And now? Now I think maybe she was right. He turned back. Maybe you were in that hallway for a reason. Maybe all of this... He gestured at the apartment, the documents, the impossible situation. Is exactly where you're supposed to be. Emma wanted to argue. Instead, she found herself nodding slowly. My mother used to say something similar, that God wastes nothing, not pain, not struggle, not even mistakes. Wise woman, Margaret observed. Stubborn woman, Emma corrected with a faint smile. We haven't spoken in 2 years. She thought I was wasting my life. Were you? Kai asked. Emma considered the question. The years of cleaning floors, of being overlooked, of praying for purpose while scrubbing other people's blood. It had felt like waste, like punishment for being born poor and black and quietly faithful in a world that rewarded loud ambition. But those years had also taught her patience, humility, resilience, They'd taught her to act without expectation of reward. They'd made her invisible enough to be in that hallway when Kai needed someone, anyone, to see him as human rather than powerful. "No," she said finally. "I don't think I was." Margaret smiled, the first genuine smile Emma had seen from her. "Then let's make sure those years count for something. Tomorrow we have a public hearing to prepare for. The initiative's next phase needs approval, and every board member who wants Kai gone will be watching." "Will I need to be there?" Emma asked. "Not yet, but soon." Kai gathered his papers. "Victor Langley is smart, patient, and ruthless. He'll wait until the moment we're most vulnerable, then strike. We need you educated and ready before that happens." After they left, Emma stood alone in the sterile apartment, feeling the weight of knowledge settling onto her shoulders like a yoke. She knelt beside the couch. It felt wrong to use the bed for prayer somehow, and spoke into the silence. "I don't know how to do this. I don't know if I'm strong enough. But if this is where you want me..." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Then help me be worthy of it. Not for me. For the people who need this initiative to survive." The silence held no answers. But somewhere in her chest, beneath the fear and doubt, a small flame of determination began to burn. Emma woke to the smell of coffee and the murmur of voices. She pulled on the robe someone had left folded at the foot of the guest bed, silk, expensive, foreign against her skin, and padded barefoot into the living room. Kai sat at the dining table, papers spread before him, a half-eaten bagel forgotten on a plate. Morning light caught the silver in his hair, more than she'd noticed before, evidence of stress that expensive suits usually hid. He looked up as she entered. "I'm sorry, I should have called first." "It's fine, you probably own this place." Emma moved to the kitchen, found the coffee pot by instinct. "How'd the board meeting go?" "Postponed. Victor's playing a longer game than I thought." Kai pushed aside his papers. He's building a case slowly, documenting every decision he can paint as erratic, every risk I take to protect the initiative. When he finally moves, it'll be ironclad. Emma poured coffee into a mug that probably cost more than her monthly rent. "How long do we have?" "Weeks, maybe days." He studied her over the rim of his own cup. "I wanted to thank you properly. I never got the chance at the hospital." "You were unconscious. That's a pretty good excuse." "After, I mean, when you were fired." His knuckles whitened around the mug. "They told me you'd violated protocol. By the time I realized what actually happened, you were gone. I looked for you, hired investigators, checked every clinic and hospital in the state. It was like you'd vanished." "Because someone wanted me to." Emma sat across from him, the table vast between them. "Margaret said they were erasing my records even before I was fired." "Victor's work. He must have known immediately that you were a threat." Kai set down his coffee. "Emma, I need you to understand something. The night you saved me, I'd just found out that my entire board had voted to kill the initiative. Not postpone it. Kill it. I was in that office trying to decide if I should fight or just let it all go. You were giving up. I was calculating whether the fight was worth what it would cost." His smile was bitter. "Then I collapsed, and a woman I'd never met risked everything to save my life. A woman who had every reason to walk away. No recognition, no reward, probably legal consequences. And you stayed anyway." Emma looked into her coffee, uncomfortable with the intensity of his gaze. "It's what I was trained to do." "No, it's who you are." Kai leaned forward. "I've spent 15 years in boardrooms with people who calculate the cost of everything. Kindness, integrity, human life. You're the first person I've met who acted without calculation." "I calculated. I just decided some things are worth more than safety." "That's what makes you different." He pulled out a thin folder. "I want to show you something." Inside were photos, children in hospital beds, families gathered around well pumps, elderly patients receiving vaccinations. Each image was annotated with dates, locations, outcomes. This is what the initiative has accomplished in 3 years. Kai said quietly. 1,200 lives saved, 15 communities with clean water, 3 diseases on track for eradication in Southeast Asia. If the board succeeds, all of this stops. Emma studied the faces, brown and black and golden, young and old, all bearing the mark of suffering met with hope. And you think I can protect this? I think you're the only one who will. He closed the folder gently. Everyone else in my life has an agenda. You're the only person who saved me simply because I was dying. That's a low bar for trust. In my world, it's Mount Everest. Kai stood, moving to the window. Margaret will teach you the mechanics, how to read financials, navigate corporate politics, recognize the players. But the real question is simpler. When the time comes, will you fight for these people even if it costs you everything? Emma joined him at the window, looking down at the city below. I already lost everything for one person. What's a few thousand more? Kai's laugh was surprised, genuine. You're either very brave or very foolish. Probably both. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the morning traffic crawl through distant streets. Emma felt something shift. Not trust exactly, but the beginning of understanding. Kai wasn't just a billionaire with a savior complex. He was a man who'd watched his sister die and spent his life trying to rewrite that ending for strangers. My mother always said that God doesn't call the equipped. Emma said softly. He equips the called. Your mother sounds wise. She's terrified and angry and disappointed. Emma's throat tightened. We haven't spoken since I took the hospital job. She thought I was settling, wasting my degree. Were you? I thought so. Now I'm not sure. Emma turned from the window. Maybe I needed to learn how to be invisible before I could handle being seen. The next week blurred into a rhythm. Margaret arriving each morning with briefcases full of documents, Kai joining them for strategic discussions over lunch, evenings spent alone with legal texts and financial reports that made Emma's eyes cross. Day 2, corporate structure. The board has 12 members, Margaret explained, pointing to an organizational chart. 4 are loyalists, genuinely committed to the initiative. 3 are neutral. They'll vote with whoever seems to be winning. 5 are Victor's people, ready to dismantle everything the moment Kai shows weakness. Emma studied the faces. What about you? Where do you fit? I resigned, remember? I have no official power. Margaret's smile was sharp, which is exactly what makes me useful. Day 3, patent law. Each technology is protected under a different structure, Kai explained, spreading blueprints across the table. Some are licensed for free to non-profits, others are held in trust, only accessible through partnership agreements. The key is that no single entity can own everything. It's deliberately fragmented to prevent monopolization. Clever, Emma said, tracing connections with her finger. But doesn't that make it vulnerable to being picked apart? That's why the failsafe exists. You'd inherit the master keys, the ability to reassemble or permanently fragment the portfolio depending on what serves the mission. Day 4, meeting the scientists. Margaret arranged a video call with the research team. Faces appeared on screen. Dr. Amara Okafor from Nigeria, Dr. James Chen from Singapore, Dr. Sofia Reyes from Mexico. Each described their work with passion that reminded Emma why any of this mattered. We're 6 months from human trials on the sickle cell therapy. Dr. Okafor said, with proper funding, we could have treatment centers operational within 2 years. After the call, Emma sat quietly, overwhelmed. These people are brilliant. They should be leading the initiative, not me. They're brilliant at science, Kai corrected. But when pharmaceutical companies offer them millions to bury their work, when governments threaten to revoke research permits, they need someone who'll say no without calculating the cost. Day 5, Crisis Simulation. Victor leaks the initiative's financials to the press, Margaret said, playing the antagonist. Accusations of mismanagement, wasted funds, Kai's mental instability. What do you do? Emma thought carefully. Counter with the lives saved. Show outcomes, not inputs. The media doesn't care about outcomes in Nigeria. Then I go to Nigeria. Emma met Margaret's eyes. I visit the communities, document everything, bring back stories that make it real. Kai, watching from the corner, nodded slowly. Good. Not perfect, but good. You're thinking about narrative, not just facts. Day 6. Ethical Dilemmas. A government offers to fund the initiative in exchange for exclusive access to the technology. Kai posed. They'll save thousands of their own citizens, but prevent access to the rest of the world. Do you accept? Emma didn't hesitate. No. Even if refusal means those thousands die? Even then, the moment we allow exclusive access, we've betrayed the mission. What if I disagree with you? Kai pushed. What if I think compromise is better than purity? Emma looked at him steadily. Then I hope I have the courage to overrule you. Kai's smile was approving. That's the right answer. On the 7th night, Kai found Emma on the apartment's balcony. Small, mostly for show, but enough to feel outside the glass cage. She'd wrapped herself in a blanket against the autumn chill, staring at city lights that glittered like earthbound stars. Couldn't sleep? Kai asked, joining her. Too much information. My brain keeps spinning. Emma shifted to make room. Tell me something that's not in the briefings. Why did you really choose me? Kai was quiet for a long moment. My sister's name was Jasmine. She was 16 when she died, same age I was when I started my first company. I was so busy trying to prove I was smart, trying to make money, that I didn't visit her the last 3 months she was in the hospital. You were 19. You were a kid yourself. I was selfish. His voice held old pain. She died asking for me, and I wasn't there because I was chasing success. Everything I've built since then, the money, the initiative, all of it, has been trying to make up for that moment. Emma understood suddenly. You see her in those children's faces. Every single one. Kai looked at her. When I woke up and saw you standing there, covered in blood, I asked who you were, and you said nobody. Like you genuinely believed you didn't matter. In that moment, I didn't. You were alive. That's what mattered. That's exactly why I chose you. Kai turned to face her fully. Everyone in my world believes they matter. They fight for credit, recognition, legacy. You fought for a stranger's life without even wanting your name remembered. That kind of humility paired with that kind of courage? It's rarer than genius. Emma pulled the blanket tighter. I'm not humble. I'm just used to being invisible. There's a difference between being unseen and choosing to serve without recognition. Kai's expression was serious. Emma, when this falls apart, and it will fall apart, you're going to be alone with impossible choices. The board will offer you money to walk away. Victor will threaten your life. The press will question your qualifications. And somewhere in all that noise, you'll have to decide whether you're doing this for recognition or for those kids in the photos. What if I don't know the difference? Then you'll figure it out the way you figured out how to save my life, by acting before you have time to doubt yourself. Kai stood. The hearing's tomorrow. You should get some rest. Will I be there? No, but it's your first test as the hidden successor. Tomorrow they'll try to attack the initiative publicly. How you respond, even from the shadows, will tell us if you're ready for what's coming. After he left, Emma stayed on the balcony, watching the city breathe. Somewhere out there, her mother was probably asleep in her small house, unaware that her daughter's life had been rewritten by blood and fate and impossible choices. I hope you'd be proud of this. Emma thought, I hope you'd understand. The wind carried no answer, but Emma went inside feeling something she hadn't felt in years, purpose that extended beyond survival. Tomorrow she'd watch powerful people try to destroy something good, and somehow she'd have to learn how to stop them. Emma watched the live stream from the secure apartment, Margaret beside her providing running commentary. The hearing room was modern, all glass and blonde wood, filled with board members, journalists, and public health officials. Kai sat at the witness table, composed despite the predatory atmosphere. Victor Langley leaned back in his chair with the confidence of someone who'd already won, his silver hair catching the lights. When he spoke, his voice was smooth, reasonable, deadly. Mr. Whitmore, could you explain why the initiative has burned through $3 billion with limited measurable outcomes? Kai's response was calm. We've saved 1,200 lives and established sustainable infrastructure in 1,200 lives. Victor smiled. That's $2.5 million per person. Hardly cost-effective. Human life isn't a balance sheet item. To shareholders, everything is. Victor pulled out documents. I have testimony from 3 board-certified physicians concerned about your recent decision-making. Erratic behavior, paranoid accusations, unauthorized fund transfers. Protecting the initiative from corporate raiders isn't paranoia, Victor. It's due diligence. The exchange continued, Victor building his case brick by brick while Kai defended with facts that sounded weak against calculated doubt. Emma's hands clenched in her lap. He's losing, she whispered. He knows. Margaret replied. Victor controls the narrative. This isn't about truth, it's about perception. On screen, a public health official stood to speak. The Whitmore Initiative has provided my region with water purification systems that have eliminated cholera outbreaks. Whatever the cost, the impact is undeniable. Victor's smile never wavered. And yet, other organizations provide similar services at a fraction of the cost. This committee must ask whether Mr. Whitmore's emotional attachment to this project is clouding his business judgment. The hearing concluded with no decision. The committee would review and vote within 30 days. But Emma saw the truth in Kai's tight shoulders as he left the building. Victor had planted seeds of doubt that would grow in the dark. The call came at 2 p.m. Emma stared at her mother's name on the screen, unchanged in her contacts after 2 years of silence. She answered on the 4th ring. Mama? Emma Rose Carter. Her mother's voice carried the weight of maternal concern and reproach. I saw the news. Something about that billionaire and a medical project. They showed footage of the hearing, and I could swear I saw... A pause. Are you involved in this? Emma closed her eyes. It's complicated. That's what you always say when you're in over your head. But the reproach had softened. Baby, I'm not calling to fight. I'm calling because I'm scared. Is this man taking advantage of you? No, Mama, he saved me, actually. In a way. You saved him. I read between the lines. Her mother's voice cracked. You were always doing that, saving people who never saved you back. This is different. How? Emma struggled for words. Remember when you used to say that God doesn't waste anything? That even pain has purpose? A long silence. I remember. I think maybe all those years of being invisible were preparing me for this. For a moment when I'd need to act without worrying about recognition or consequences. And this moment required you to work for a billionaire? It required me to save a life. The billionaire part came later. Emma moved to the window, phone pressed to her ear. Mama, I know you thought I was wasting my degree. working beneath my potential. I thought you were hiding." Her mother's voice gentled. "You were always so brilliant, so capable. And then you took that cleaning job like you were punishing yourself for something." "I was learning humility." "You already had humility, baby. What you needed was to believe you deserved better." The words hit harder than Emma expected. Maybe I'm learning that too. "Are you safe?" The question carried the weight of maternal instinct. "I'm protected. There are complications, but I'm okay. Emma, I'm praying for you every day, whether you believe it or not." "I believe it." Emma's throat tightened. "Mama, can I ask you something? How did you stay faithful when Papa died? When everything fell apart?" A weighted pause. "By remembering that faith isn't about understanding, it's about trust when understanding fails." Her mother's breath was audible. Sometimes God puts us in impossible places to show us who we are capable of becoming. Esther 4:14. "You remember your scripture?" Approval warmed the words. "Then you remember what Mordecai said? And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this?" "This isn't exactly royal, Mama." "Isn't it? You hold power you didn't seek, responsible for lives you'll never meet, facing enemies who want to destroy something good. Sounds royal to me. Sounds terrifying, too." Emma laughed, the sound breaking with emotion. "It's definitely terrifying." "Then come home. Let me pray over you proper. Let me—" Her mother's voice caught. "Let me tell you I'm proud of you, even if I don't understand what you're doing." "I can't leave right now. Security concerns." "Then I'm coming to you. Mama, don't mama me. I haven't seen my daughter in 2 years. If Muhammad won't come to the mountain's getting on a bus." The steel beneath her mother's gentleness emerged. "Text me the address. I'm bringing my prayer oil and your father's Bible, and we're going to sit together like family should." After they hung up, Emma sat in stunned silence. Margaret found her there 30 minutes later, staring at nothing. "What happened?" Margaret asked. "My mother's coming. Tomorrow." "That's—" Margaret considered. "Actually good. You'll need emotional anchoring for what's coming." "What is coming?" "Victor's next move." Margaret pulled out her tablet. "He's scheduled a press conference for Friday, 3 days from now. Timing suggests he's preparing for something bigger than the hearing." Emma's phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "The truth will come out soon. Enjoy your last days of relevance." She showed it to Margaret, whose expression hardened. "He's escalating. Stay inside, stay vigilant. And Emma?" Margaret's hand rested briefly on her shoulder. "Whatever happens, remember why you're doing this." The apartment felt different when Emma's mother arrived the next morning. Smaller somehow, less sterile, infused with the smell of cocoa butter and the subtle grace of maternal presence. Lillian Carter stood in the doorway, clutching a worn Bible and a small bottle of anointing oil, her eyes scanning her daughter with the expertise of someone who'd bandaged scraped knees and stayed up through fevers. "You've lost weight," was the first thing she said. "Hello, Mama." Emma hugged her, feeling the familiar shape of home in her mother's embrace. They sat at the kitchen island, the same place Emma had spent hours studying corporate documents, and her mother made tea with practiced efficiency, finding things in cupboards by maternal instinct. "Tell me everything," Lillian said, settling onto a stool. "No abbreviations, no protecting me. I'm your mother. I can handle the truth." So Emma told her, about the storm, the surgery, the firing, about Kai's trust and Margaret's tutoring and the weight of decisions she never wanted to make. Her mother listened without interrupting, her hands wrapped around her tea mug, her face shifting through shock and concern and something that might have been pride. When Emma finished, Lillian was quiet for a long moment. You performed surgery with stolen equipment to save a stranger. Yes, Mom. Could have gone to prison. Yes, Mom. Probably should have walked away. I couldn't. Emma met her mother's eyes. Mama, he was dying, and I was the only one there. I couldn't just watch. No. Her mother's voice softened. You couldn't. That's who you are. My daughter who can't walk past suffering without trying to bind the wounds. She reached across the counter, taking Emma's hands. Baby, I'm sorry. For what? For making you feel like cleaning floors was failure. For not seeing that you were learning something I couldn't teach you, how to serve without bitterness. Lillian's eyes were wet. You're doing what your father did. He was a janitor too, you know, at the hospital where you were born. He used to say that dignity doesn't come from titles, it comes from how you treat people when no one's watching. Emma had forgotten that. Or maybe she'd never really understood it until now. I wish he could see this. She whispered. He does, baby. He does. Her mother released her hands, pulling out the Bible and oil. Now, let's do what we came here to do. Let's pray over you like we should have been doing all along. They knelt together in that expensive, sterile apartment, mother and daughter, bound by faith and blood, and the stubborn belief that God uses broken things for holy purposes. Lillian prayed over Emma's head, anointing her with oil that smelled of olives and antiquity, speaking blessings and protection, and the kind of powerful intercession that comes from mothers who've watched their children suffer. Lord, you've placed my daughter in a position she didn't seek and doesn't understand. Give her wisdom beyond her years. Give her courage beyond her fears. Let her be salt and light in places of darkness. And Lord, her voice broke. Keep her safe. Please, keep her safe. When they finished, Emma's cheeks were wet, and something in her chest had loosened. A knot of loneliness she'd carried so long she'd forgotten it was there. Thank you, Mama. That's what mothers do. Lillian stood, brushing off her knees. Now, you're going to take me to dinner, somewhere nice since you're living in a billionaire's apartment, and you're going to tell me about this Kai person, because any man who trusts my daughter with billions of dollars better have excellent judgment. Emma laughed, genuine, surprised, healing. He does. I think you'd actually like him. We'll see about that. Kai's home was different than Emma expected. Not a sterile penthouse, but a brownstone in an older neighborhood, filled with books and artwork that suggested actual living. He greeted them at the door himself, no security visible, though Emma suspected they were nearby. Mrs. Carter. He shook Lillian's hand. Thank you for coming. I've wanted to meet the woman who raised Emma. That's very gracious, Lillian said, her tone assessing. But you'll forgive a mother for being cautious about men who hand her daughter billion-dollar responsibilities. Kai's smile was genuine. I'd be concerned if you weren't. Dinner was simple. Roasted chicken, vegetables, bread that Kai admitted he'd ordered from a bakery because he'd burned 2 attempts. They ate in a dining room lined with photos, Kai's sister prominent among them, frozen at 16 with a smile that suggested she'd never imagined not having a future. Emma told me about Jasmine, Lillian said quietly. I'm sorry for your loss. Thank you. Kai's fingers traced the wine glass stem. She would have liked your daughter. Jasmine had a gift for seeing through pretense. She would have recognized Emma's integrity immediately. My daughter has always been too kind for her own good. But Lillian's expression held affection. Tell me, Mr. Whitmore, why Emma? Surely you have advisors, lawyers, people trained for this? I do, and none of them have Emma's moral clarity. Kai looked at Emma. The night she saved my life, she had every reason to walk away. She did it anyway, knowing it would cost her everything. That's not something you can train or purchase. That's character. And you're trusting that character with the power to change or destroy your life's work. I'm trusting it with something more important than my work. Kai met Lillian's eyes directly. I'm trusting it with the lives of thousands of people who will never know her name. People like Jasmine, who die because the world decides their lives aren't cost-effective. The room went quiet. Lillian studied him for a long moment before nodding slowly. You love her. Your sister, I mean. Emma reminds you of her. Emma reminds me of what I should have been. Kai's voice was soft. Selfless when it mattered. Brave without audience. The kind of person Jasmine deserved to have in her corner. After dinner, while Emma showed her mother the guest room, Lillian pulled her daughter aside. I take back my doubts. That man carries his sister's death like a stone around his neck. He's trying to save everyone he couldn't save back then. Is that bad? It's human. Broken, but trying. Lillian cupped Emma's face. Just promise me you won't carry his stone too. You save who you can, baby, but you can't redeem the whole world. I'm just trying to do what's right. I know. That's what scares me. Her mother kissed her forehead. That's also what makes me proud. Victor's press conference was scheduled for 10 a.m. Emma, Margaret, and Kai gathered in the apartment to watch, the tension thick enough to taste. Emma's mother had returned home the night before, leaving behind blessed oil and maternal warnings to trust God but lock your doors. Victor appeared on screen, flanked by 3 board members and 2 lawyers. He looked grave, concerned, the perfect mask of someone doing an unpleasant but necessary duty. It is with deep regret, Victor began, that we must announce concerns regarding Mr. Whitmore's fitness to lead the Whitmore Humanitarian Initiative. Recent erratic behavior, unauthorized fund transfers, and paranoid accusations against board members suggest a mental health crisis that requires immediate intervention. Bastard, Margaret muttered. We have initiated proceedings to temporarily remove Mr. Whitmore from operational control, pending a comprehensive medical evaluation. This action is taken not out of malice, but out of concern for both Mr. Whitmore's well-being and the integrity of the initiative itself. What does this mean? Emma asked. It means they're trying to invoke the mental health clause in the corporate bylaws, Kai said quietly. If they succeed, I'm removed from authority and the board takes control. Which triggers the failsafe, Margaret added. Emma becomes the contingency authority. On screen, a reporter asked, What happens to the initiative if Mr. Whitmore is removed? Victor's smile was reassuring. The board will ensure continuity of operations while exploring strategic partnerships that maximize the technology's potential impact. Translation: They'll sell everything to the highest bidder, Margaret said. Kai's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his face paling. Emma, I need you to listen very carefully. In approximately 30 seconds, your entire world is going to change. What? The door burst open. 4 men in suits, FBI, according to their badges, entered with efficient professionalism. Kai Whitmore. The lead agent's voice was formal. You're under arrest for securities fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy to defraud shareholders. You have the right to remain silent. Emma watched, frozen, as they cuffed Kai's wrists and read him his rights. His eyes found hers across the chaos. Remember what we talked about, he said. The photos, the people. That's what matters. Then they led him out, and the apartment was suddenly too quiet. Margaret's phone rang. She answered, listened, her face hardening. Victor just filed a motion to dissolve the initiative and liquidate assets. He's moving fast. Emma sank into a chair, her mind reeling. This was planned, all of it. Of course it was. Margaret was already typing on her laptop. Victor's been building this case for months. The press conference was cover. Get public opinion on his side before striking legally. Now Kai's arrested. I'm about to be named an accessory, and you—" She looked up. "You're about to become the sole authority over $4 billion, which makes you Victor's next target." The phone in Emma's pocket buzzed. "Unknown number. Sign over the initiative or your mother becomes a person of interest. You have 24 hours. Emma's hands shook as she showed the message to Margaret. "They're not playing anymore," Margaret said quietly. "Emma, you need to decide right now. Do you fight or do you walk away?" Emma thought of Jasmine's face in the photos, of the children receiving water and vaccines and hope, of her father, a janitor who'd taught dignity through service, of her mother's prayer, "Let her be salt and light in places of darkness." She thought of Kai, bleeding out on an executive wing floor, saved by hands that society said didn't matter. "I fight," Emma said. "Tell me how." Margaret's smile was fierce. "First, we make you disappear." Emma woke to Margaret shaking her shoulder, dawn barely breaking outside. "You need to see this." The television showed a news anchor with practiced solemnity, confirming that tech billionaire Kai Whitmore died early this morning in what authorities are calling a suspicious accident in Geneva. Emma's world tilted. "No, he was just arrested yesterday. How?" "They're saying he made bail, flew to Geneva for emergency meetings." Margaret's hands trembled. The body was found 3 hours ago, burned beyond recognition. The apartment door buzzed. Federal marshals served Emma with papers. Assumption of authority over the initiative, civil suit alleging conspiracy to defraud, SEC investigation into embezzlement. Legal documents scattered across the floor like accusations. "This is fabricated," Margaret protested. "Ms. Carter had no knowledge." "Ma'am, we're just serving papers." After they left, Margaret's phone rang. Her face hardened. "My arrest warrant just issued. Emma, I have maybe an hour." She pressed a flash drive into Emma's palm. "This contains everything, real financial records, proof of Victor's corruption. You have 2 choices, sign over the initiative or run and expose the truth." A knock at the door. Margaret checked the security screen. "They're here for me. Back entrance now. Grey sedan waiting, driver named Marcus." "Where will you go?" "Prison, probably." Margaret pushed Emma toward the hallway. "Go. Kai's death can't be for nothing." Emma ran. Marcus drove 3 hours to a small white church surrounded by fields. Pastor Samuel Brooks waited on the steps, silver-haired and gentle-eyed. "Emma Carter, come inside, child. You look like you've been through a war." "I think I'm losing one." "Wars aren't lost until you surrender." He held the door. "And something tells me you're not the surrendering type." In the church basement, Emma told him everything. When she finished, Pastor Brooks leaned forward. "Do you know what Gethsemane means? It's where Jesus asked God to take away his calling if there was any other way. Even Jesus wanted an exit when he saw what faithfulness would cost." "I'm not Jesus." "No, but you're called to the same faithfulness." His eyes held hers. "Emma, why did you save that man's life?" "Because he was dying." "And now he's dead anyway. Was it worth it?" Emma's throat tightened. "I don't know." "Yes, you do. That's why you're here instead of signing papers." He stood. "God doesn't call us because we're strong enough. He calls us so we'll discover strength we didn't know we had." They prayed together as darkness fell. When they finished, Emma felt resolve replacing fear. "I need to—" "Call that lawyer," she said. "In the morning. Tonight, you rest. Tomorrow, you fight." Emma couldn't sleep. She lay on the cot staring at water-stained ceiling tiles, the flash drive beside her containing evidence that could expose corruption or seal her fate. She pulled out her father's Bible, worn from her mother's fingers. It fell open to Esther. "And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this?" Emma read it 3 times, feeling the weight of providential positioning. She hadn't asked to be in that hallway when Kai collapsed, hadn't asked to inherit this war. But here she was, holding evidence that could save thousands of lives or protect her own safety. Not both. Never both. She thought of Kai's sister frozen at 16 in photographs, her life reduced to catalyst for someone else's redemption, of children in initiative photos waiting for help, of her father who'd cleaned floors with dignity because service didn't require recognition. Okay, Emma whispered into darkness. Okay, I'll do it, but God, you better show up because I can't do this alone. Somewhere in her chest, beneath fear and grief, that small flame of determination grew brighter. Morning came with coffee and gospel music. Pastor Brooks set the table for breakfast. You slept. Some. Emma accepted the coffee. How do you keep believing when everything you build gets torn down? 63. He said quietly. I've buried 63 young people in 40 years of ministry, children who should have lived. Each time I asked God why. Each time God stayed silent. And each time I had to choose whether their deaths would make me bitter or better. Which did you choose? Both. I'm bitter about injustice. I'm better at loving people through it. His smile was sad. You can hold both truths, Emma. You can rage against darkness and still light candles. They spent 2 hours planning. Emma would contact the lawyer David Chen, arrange meetings with journalists, deliver Margaret's evidence. Pastor Brooks would reach out to civil rights organizations, faith communities, anyone who might amplify truth. This will get ugly. He warned. Victor has resources to shape narratives. You'll be painted as delusional, opportunistic, dangerous. Let them. I've been invisible for years. I can survive being misunderstood. At 9 a.m. she called David Chen. His voice was careful, assessing. Ms. Carter, Marcus said you might call. I need help exposing corporate fraud and possibly murder. A pause. Can you prove it? I have documentation, financial records, emails, proof of systematic corruption. Another pause. I'll be blunt. Your case is difficult. Unknown woman with sudden inheritance, facing fraud accusations. The man who trusted you is dead. Any defense looks self-serving. So you won't help. I didn't say that, but you need to understand what you're asking. This will take months, maybe years, cost everything you have, and you might lose anyway. I've already lost everything. What's left to take? Your freedom, your reputation, your mother's peace of mind. Emma thought of Kai's blood on her hands, Margaret in handcuffs, children waiting for water. I'm sure. David Chen called at 6 p.m. on the 5th day. Turn on Channel 7. Now. Emma's hands shook as she fumbled with the remote. Marcus stood behind her, silent and solid. The screen showed a news anchor with breaking news gravity. Documents obtained by this station reveal systematic fraud within the Whitmore Initiative Board, but that's not the most shocking part. The scene cut to a conference room, and at the head of the table, very much alive, sat Kai Whitmore. Emma's knees gave out. Marcus caught her as Kai's voice filled the room. 3 days ago, the world was told I died in Geneva. That was a lie, one I orchestrated to expose corruption I've been documenting for 6 months. The journalists erupted. Kai raised his hand for silence. My board, led by Victor Langley, systematically attempted to dismantle the humanitarian initiative to profit from technologies designed to be given freely. When I resisted, they tried to have me declared mentally unfit. When that failed, they escalated. The camera showed footage. Victor entering offices, phone conversations about liquidating assets, emails discussing removing the Carter problem. They came after Ms. Emma Carter. Kai continued, a woman whose only crime was saving my life. They fabricated charges, destroyed her reputation, threatened her family, all to gain control of life-saving technology. A journalist leaned forward. You're saying your own board attempted murder? I'm saying they created conditions hoping for my death. When that didn't work fast enough, they made me legally dead through fraud. The evidence is extensive. Kai looked directly at the camera. Emma, if you're watching, I'm sorry. I had to let you believe I was dead. But your courage, your refusal to surrender, exposed exactly the corruption I hoped to prove. Emma's face was wet, breath coming in gasps. The federal investigation is ongoing. Kai continued. But tonight, the truth is public. The initiative survives, and the woman who saved it, twice now, deserves the world's gratitude, not persecution. The phone didn't stop ringing. David Chen arrived at midnight with pizza and updates. FBI issued warrants for Victor Langley and 4 board members. Margaret's being released. Your account's unfrozen. Turns out it's hard to keep someone's assets locked when they're proven innocent on national television. Kai's really alive, Emma said, testing reality. Very much so, and asking to see you. David pulled out papers. But first, decisions. The initiative is legally yours now. Kai transferred it fully before his death. You're the sole authority. I don't want it. Then give it back, or restructure it, or burn it down. David's smile was tired. Emma, you have power now. Real power. The question is, what you do with it? Emma looked at Marcus, who shrugged. Mom, that man planned his own death to protect what you two built. Seems like quitting now would make it pointless. I didn't build anything. I just saved a life. You saved more than one. David showed her articles. Since the broadcast, donations to humanitarian causes are up 40%. 3 pharmaceutical companies pledged to release patents. Your story has ignited something bigger than the initiative. The charges dropped at 4 p.m. Margaret walked out of the courthouse to cheers from supporters, community activists, faith leaders, people who'd followed the story. Emma met her on the steps, embracing while cameras captured the moment. Thank you, Emma whispered, for not giving up. Thank you for being worth believing in. Margaret smiled, tired but genuine. Ready to change the world? I'm ready to try. Emma's mother arrived that evening, unannounced, because mothers know when daughters need them. They sat together eating takeout, processing the impossible week. You looked good on television, Lillian said. Confident, like you finally realized what I've always known, that you were never invisible. You were just waiting for the moment when being seen mattered more than being safe. They prayed together as darkness fell, prayers of thanksgiving, hope, asking wisdom for work ahead. For the first time in months, Emma felt peace. Not certainty or safety, but peace in purpose. The next morning, Emma met Kai at his brownstone. He looked different, thinner, more lines around his eyes, tiredness that went bone deep. Emma. They stood uncertain, bridging the gap between living and dead, trust and betrayal. I made tea, he said finally. They sat in the kitchen where Emma had eaten dinner with her mother a lifetime ago. Kai poured with shaking hands. I was in a federal safe house, he began. Complete isolation. I watched them destroy your reputation and couldn't defend you. You could have told me. No, I couldn't. Kai met her eyes. Victor had informants everywhere. If you'd known I was alive, you would have acted differently. They would have known the death was fake. So you sacrificed my peace of mind. Yes, I sacrificed your peace to protect thousands of lives. I won't apologize for the outcome, only for the pain it caused you personally. Emma sipped tea, processing. When did you plan it? After the hearing. When Victor moved for my arrest, I knew they'd escalate to violence. He pulled out a folder. Margaret and I worked with federal prosecutors for 2 months, but we needed them to move openly, without fear. My death removed all barriers. And if I'd signed over the initiative? Then we'd have evidence of extortion, but the technology would be lost. Kai's jaw tightened. I gambled on your character. I bet everything that you'd fight. What if you were wrong? Then the initiative dies, but you'd be safe. Every contingency had you surviving. He leaned forward. You were never expendable, just manipulated by trust that you wouldn't break. They sat in silence, the kitchen filled with complicated truth. I forgive you, Emma said finally. I don't like what you did. I may never fully trust you again, but I understand why, and I forgive you. Kai's shoulders sagged with relief. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just don't do it again. Emma set down her cup. What happens now? Now we rebuild properly. He slid papers across the table. New articles of incorporation. The initiative becomes fully independent. No board except advisors you choose, no shareholders, no profit motive. You have complete authority. Emma scanned documents, feeling responsibility settling back onto barely recovered shoulders. I can't do this alone. You won't have to. Margaret agreed to return as COO, science team intact, David Chen handling legal. Kai paused. And I'll stay as far away as you want, or as close as you'll allow. The official initiative launch happened on a clear November morning in a rural Virginia community center, deliberately not in New York or D.C., but in a place representing the people they existed to serve. Emma stood before local residents, health workers, and press, with Kai and Margaret flanking her. Behind them, a screen showed the first distribution site, solar-powered water purification systems being installed in a Kenyan village. Today marks the beginning of what we hope will be a new model. Emma began. Not charity that creates dependence, but partnership that builds capacity. Not temporary aid, but sustainable infrastructure. She gestured to the screen. These water systems cost approximately $2,000 each, serving communities of up to 500 people. We're giving them away, completely free, to any village that commits to maintaining them and training others. A local reporter raised her hand. Critics say this model is unsustainable, that you'll run out of funding within 5 years. Maybe we will. Emma smiled. But in those 5 years, we'll save thousands of lives. We'll prove the model works, and hopefully we'll inspire others to join, not for profit, but because it's right. Kai spoke last, his words brief. I built a fortune on technology. I almost let that fortune corrupt the mission. Emma saved my life, then saved my soul by refusing to let me quit on humanity. This initiative succeeds or fails on whether we maintain that moral clarity. I trust Emma to guard it. Emma returned to the community clinic where she'd worked before everything changed. Director Santos welcomed her back, not as employee, but as donor whose first act had been fully funding the clinic's operations for 5 years. You didn't have to do this, he said, showing new equipment, expanded staff, patients receiving previously impossible care. Yes, I did. Emma watched a nurse taking blood pressure for an elderly man. This clinic taught me that dignity isn't about titles or recognition. It's about showing up. I want to make sure others can keep showing up. She spent the afternoon with patients, not as benefactor, but as someone who remembered sitting in their chairs, waiting for care in a world that didn't seem to care back. Mrs. Rodriguez gripped Emma's hand with fierce gratitude. Mija, I saw you on television. I told everyone, that's my nurse, the one who always listened. I'm still your nurse, Emma said gently. I'm just trying to listen to more people now. Emma enrolled in surgical certification on a cold January morning, walking into the teaching hospital as a legitimate student. The program director reviewed her application skeptically. Ms. Carter, your unique qualifications notwithstanding, surgical certification requires 5,000 hours of supervised practice, successful board examinations, and demonstrated clinical competency. Emma recited calmly. I've read the requirements. I'll meet them. You also run a multi-billion-dollar organization, which is why I need excellent time management. Emma smiled. Doctor, I performed emergency surgery under combat conditions with stolen equipment. I think I can handle your curriculum. The director's skepticism softened. Fair point. Welcome to the program. Don't expect special treatment. I'd be disappointed if you offered it. The months that followed were grueling in ways Emma had never imagined. Early morning surgeries at 6 a.m., where she assisted senior surgeons with trembling hands and exhausted concentration. Afternoon meetings at initiative headquarters, where decisions about millions of dollars and thousands of lives required clarity, her tired mind struggled to maintain. Evening classes that stretched past midnight, studying anatomy and pharmacology while her eyes burned and her back screamed from constant motion. Emma gave up sleep first, then privacy, then any pretense of normal life that didn't revolve around scalpels and spreadsheets and the crushing weight of responsibility she'd never asked to carry. Kai checked in weekly, his concern growing with each visit. He found her one Thursday evening in the surgical practice lab, suturing synthetic tissue with mechanical precision, her movements automatic from exhaustion. Emma, you're running an organization and completing surgical residency. That's 2 full-time jobs. 3, if you count trying to maintain relationships with my mother and Margaret and everyone else I've been neglecting. Emma looked up from the sutures, her eyes bloodshot. But I'm managing. Managing isn't thriving. Kai sat beside her, watching her hands move with the precision that had saved his life. Why are you pushing yourself like this? I'm not proving worth. Emma set down the needle holder, flexing cramped fingers. I'm reclaiming purpose. The initiative is important, but surgery is who I am at my core. It's the calling I heard before everything got complicated. If I lose that to administrative work and board meetings, I lose the part of myself that made any of this matter in the first place. Kai studied her face, seeing the determination beneath the exhaustion. You're afraid that if you stop being a surgeon, you'll just become another bureaucrat making decisions from distance and comfort. Yes. The admission came out raw. I'm terrified of becoming someone who talks about saving lives, but never actually holds a beating heart in my hands. Someone who knows the statistics but forgets the humans behind them. Then don't lose yourself. He stood, preparing to leave but pausing at the door. Just remember, you don't have to prove your worth anymore. You've already done that. I'm not proving worth, Kai. I'm reclaiming identity. There's a difference. The initiative hired its first cohort of interns in early spring, 20 young people from underserved communities, brilliant minds that traditional systems had overlooked or actively suppressed. Emma made mentoring them a personal priority, remembering with painful clarity what it felt like to be invisible despite exceptional ability. She held orientation in the initiative's main conference room, facing 20 pairs of eyes that held equal parts hope and skepticism. They'd been disappointed before. They'd learned not to trust promises from people in power. I'm not going to tell you this will be easy, Emma began, standing rather than sitting, making herself equal rather than elevated. I'm not going to promise that talent and hard work guarantee success, because we all know the world doesn't work that way. What I will promise is this. While you're here, you will be seen. Your ideas will be heard. Your potential will be recognized based on the quality of your work and the integrity of your character. A young man in the back raised his hand. Ms. Carter, with respect, you're a billionaire now. How can you understand what it's like for us? Fair question. Emma smiled, appreciating the challenge. 2 years ago, I was cleaning operating rooms at night and working a community clinic during the day. I had 2 degrees I couldn't use and skills nobody wanted to recognize. I was invisible in every way that society measures value. The only difference between me and you is that I got one impossible opportunity and refused to waste it. My job now is to make sure you get that same opportunity, and that you don't have to perform emergency surgery in a thunderstorm to receive it. The room relaxed slightly, skepticism giving way to cautious optimism. One morning several weeks later, a young woman appeared outside Emma's office, nervous energy radiating from her slight frame. She was perhaps 23. Black, with intelligent eyes that darted around as if constantly calculating risks and opportunities. "Ms. Carter, I'm sorry to bother you, but I wanted to thank you." "For what?" Emma set down the grant proposal she'd been reviewing. "Come in. Sit down. What's your name?" Maya Johnson." She perched on the edge of the chair, like she might need to flee at any moment. "I wanted to thank you for existing, for proving something I was starting to think was impossible." Emma leaned forward, giving Maya her complete attention. "Tell me." "I was cleaning labs to pay for my graduate program in molecular biology, working midnight to 8 a.m., then attending classes, then studying until I had to go back to work. Everyone told me to be grateful for the opportunity, that I was lucky to have any job that kept me close to the science. But you proved that cleaning labs doesn't define us, that what we do when opportunity finally comes is what matters. That invisible doesn't mean incapable." Emma felt her throat tighten with recognition. This could have been her story. Was her story in so many ways. "What's your research focus?" They talked for an hour, about Maya's work on gene expression in sickle cell disease, about her dreams of finding treatments that would be accessible to communities that couldn't afford current therapies, about the barriers she'd faced from professors who questioned whether someone who cleaned their labs could possibly contribute to cutting-edge research. When Maya finally paused for breath, Emma made a decision. "I'm putting you on the gene therapy project, lead research assistant, reporting directly to Dr. Okafor. You'll work harder than you've ever worked in your life, and you'll be evaluated purely on results, not on your background or your prior employment." Maya's eyes widened. "Dr. Okafor she's one of the leading researchers in the field. I can't possibly—" "Yes, you can." Emma's voice was firm. "I've read your published papers. I've seen your lab results. You have the ability. You've just never had someone give you the platform. Consider this your platform. Now show the world what you can do with it. I won't let you down. I know you won't, because you're not doing this for me." Emma stood, walking Maya to the door. "You're doing it for every person who's been told they're not enough, that they should be grateful for scraps from the table. Prove them wrong, Maya. That's the only validation that actually matters." After Maya left, Emma stood in her office, modest and functional, lined with photos of communities served rather than awards received, and felt the circle completing. She'd been the overlooked intern once, the cleaning woman whose potential went unrecognized. Now she was ensuring that no one else would have their gifts wasted simply because society couldn't see past their current circumstances. The humanitarian award came from the United Nations on a warm June evening. The ceremony was in Geneva, formal and overwhelming in its grandeur. Emma wore a simple black dress with her mother's pearl necklace as the only jewelry. Margaret and Kai sat in the audience as Emma accepted the award from the Secretary General. "Ms. Carter represents a new kind of leadership," the Secretary General said. "One, defined not by credentials or connections, but by moral courage and unwavering commitment to human dignity. Her story reminds us that the most powerful voices often belong to those whom society has tried hardest to silence." Emma's acceptance speech was brief. "I accept this award on behalf of everyone who has been told they don't matter, the cleaning staff who maintain our hospitals, The clinic workers who serve abandoned communities, the parents working multiple jobs, the young people with brilliant minds our systems have failed to recognize. You matter. Your service matters. And if I have proven anything, it is that one person's courage to act can change everything. The standing ovation lasted 3 minutes. Emma stood at the podium, uncomfortable with acclaim, wishing she could disappear back into the work. Afterward, an elderly woman approached, Catherine Whitmore, Kai's mother. "Ms. Carter, you saved my son's life twice, once with surgery, once with integrity." Catherine took Emma's hands. "I wanted to thank you, and to tell you that Jasmine would have loved you. You have her stubbornness, her refusal to accept that some lives are worth less than others. I wish I could have known her. You do know her." Catherine smiled through tears. "She's alive in every child who receives treatment from your initiative. Kai built this mission to redeem his guilt, but you carry it forward because you genuinely believe every life has equal value. That's not guilt. That's grace." Emma's final surgical examination came on a grey October morning, exactly 1 year after Kai's staged death. She scrubbed in beside Dr. Rahman, known for failing residents who couldn't maintain composure under pressure. The surgery was routine, appendectomy straightforward. But for Emma, it represented everything. Proof that years cleaning floors hadn't been wasted. Proof that emergency surgery in the storm had been the beginning, not the end. "Scalpel," she said calmly. When she completed the final suture, Dr. Rahman nodded. "Clean work, Dr. Carter. You passed." Dr. Carter. The title settled like a long-delayed benediction. Emma woke at 5 a.m. on a Tuesday in late autumn. Today was her first fully legal surgery as a certified surgeon. She dressed in scrubs that finally belonged to her, made coffee that tasted like purpose, and drove to the hospital where everything had begun. Her first surgery was scheduled for 7 a.m. The patient was a 14-year-old girl named Aisha with a congenital heart defect and sickle cell disease, the same condition that had killed Jasmine Whitmore at 16. The circle was completing. In the locker room, where she'd once changed out of cleaning uniforms, Emma prepared with methodical precision. Other surgeons nodded greetings, treating her as a colleague rather than a ghost. Maya Chen found her before she scrubbed in. "Emma, good luck today. Complex case." "Thank you, Maya. How's your research going?" "We're 6 months from human trials on the gene therapy for sickle cell. Dr. Okafor thinks we'll have regulatory approval by next year." Maya's eyes shone. "Because of you. Because you believed in work that traditional funding wouldn't touch. Because the work mattered more than profit. Keep believing that, Maya. Promise me." "I promise. I won't let them corrupt what we've built." Emma scrubbed in with ritual precision. Through the observation window, she could see the OR being prepared, the patient already under anesthesia. This was it. 2 years of impossible choices, all leading to this moment. "Scalpel," Emma said, her voice steady as stone. The surgery unfolded with practiced excellence. She worked alongside Dr. Singh, a cardiovascular specialist who'd mentored her through certification. Their communication was seamless. "Beautiful work," Dr. Singh murmured as Emma completed a delicate anastomosis. "You've got genuinely gifted hands, Emma." "Faithful hands," Emma corrected softly. God just finally gave them opportunity to prove what they could do. 6 hours later, she tied off the final suture and stepped back. The surgery was successful. Aisha would live, would thrive, would have the future Jasmine had been denied. Emma looked up at the observation gallery and saw them. Kai, Margaret, her mother, Pastor Brooks, Marcus, David Chen, Maya Johnson, and the other interns. Everyone who'd believed in her when she'd barely believed in herself. She made eye contact with each of them. No words needed. They understood. This was what it had all been for. After surgery, Emma found herself in the quiet corridor where she'd saved Kai's life 2 years before. She stood where Kai had collapsed and offered a prayer. Thank you for the impossible path, for the storm that forced me to act, for courage I didn't know I had, for people who believed in me, and for making my years of invisibility matter, for wasting nothing, not the pain, not the struggle, not the quiet faithfulness nobody saw. You saw. That was enough. That evening, Emma's mother hosted dinner. The small house filled with people who'd walked through fire together. Kai brought wine and stories about the clinic he'd opened in his sister's hometown. Margaret arrived with initiative updates. Water systems in 15 countries now, gene therapy programs in development, partnerships with governments recognizing that moral leadership was strength. Pastor Brooks offered a blessing over the meal. Marcus and David Chen debated sports. Maya and the other interns argued about research directions, embodying the future Emma was helping build. After dinner, Kai found Emma on the back porch, looking at stars. Penny, for your thoughts. I was thinking about Jasmine, whether she'd be happy with what we've built. I think she'd be amazed that a stranger's kindness could change so much. Kai's voice was soft. You gave me back my sister's dream, the belief that human life has value beyond what society assigns. You gave me purpose. We're partners. We've saved each other in all the ways that count. Later, Emma stood outside the hospital where everything had begun. Her phone buzzed with messages from Maya, Margaret, and her mother. One surgery had saved Kai's life 2 years ago, but that surgery had saved thousands more by proving that invisible hands could hold immeasurable power when guided by moral clarity. Emma looked up at the stars and whispered one final prayer. Thank you for seeing me when I was invisible, for using me when I felt useless, for teaching me that dignity comes not from titles, but from faithfulness to what matters most. The stars offered no audible response. But Emma didn't need one anymore. She'd learned to recognize God's voice in the quiet work, the invisible service, the ordinary faithfulness that changed the world one life at a time. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. 5 years later, the Whitmore Humanitarian Initiative operated in 47 countries. The initial 1,200 lives saved had grown to 50,000 documented cases. Emma balanced surgical practice with organizational leadership. Kai lived quietly, writing books about ethical leadership. Margaret retired, teaching ethics at universities. Emma's mother died peacefully, Emma at her bedside. And Emma, Dr. Emma Carter, surgeon, humanitarian, mentor, continued the work. Not because she sought recognition, but because faithfulness never required audience. Only courage, only obedience, only trust, one life at a time, one day at a time, one faithful act at a time, until all the invisible hands were finally seen. Thank you for being here. If something in this story stayed with you, I'd love to see you again. Subscribe, and tomorrow I'll bring you another story crafted with heart.